Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll test our microphone this evening, and it seems to be working. We still have some folks trickling in, but in the interest of your time, which I value very much, I think we'll get started this evening. Thank you very much for being here. My name's John Ingen. I work for the city, and during the course of this evening, we hope to introduce you to a subject that I hope we can have many more conversations about, and I hope we can find some solutions to. What I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about what I think this meeting isn't about. It's not about the mayor has answers, his staff has answers, the panelists have answers. I think this meeting is about listening to any answers you may have and listening to what additional questions you may have, because I'm sure we're missing some things here. When I asked you all if I could have this job, I talked about three things. I talked about open space, I talked about our rules and regulations, and I talked about affordable housing. We passed an open space bond. I'm very proud of that. We're working on our rules and regulations today through a cumbersome, lengthy process, and many of you are participating in that, and I'm very grateful for that as well. And finally, I wanted us to think about affordable housing and our friends and neighbors who, for reasons beyond their control, don't have access to the equity that I've been able to enjoy as a Missoulian, that my family's been able to enjoy, that my parents were able to enjoy, and that I hope at least some of you have been able to enjoy. I'd like more people to have that opportunity. I'd also like us to be able to provide clean, decent, safe housing for all Missoulians who want it. Those are tall orders, and I don't expect that we're going to get there tonight or anytime soon. But if we don't recognize the issues, if we don't talk to each other about them, and if we don't start chipping away, we're never getting anywhere. And I think it's really important that we begin. We have had some difficult experiences talking about affordable housing in Missoula. We have had horrible disagreements over development and how it works. We've had difficult conversations about the tools that we've applied in the community in order to enhance affordability. And we have had some failed experiments. And I want you to know this evening that I'm not here to tell you that I want to put another house in a backyard anywhere in the University District, or anywhere else for that matter, if it's not appropriate. But I got to tell you, there are places where we have lots of opportunity. We don't have to wreck neighborhoods to provide affordable housing. We can build neighborhoods, we can enhance neighborhoods, and we can work together to make this happen. And we have a real opportunity here. And the fact that you're all here tonight to talk about this is a big piece of what that opportunity is. We can talk to each other. We can talk to each other. That's what tonight's about, and that's what subsequent conversations will be about. There are 4 questions that we're going to ask near the end of this presentation, and those questions will lead to other questions. If any of you do have the answers, however, you're welcome to email me. 1 page, double-spaced. I have the answers. We'll put them to work. Otherwise, you're welcome to email me a sentence at a time with more questions or some suggestions. So with any luck, we'll begin chipping away this evening. Again, thank you all for being here. Folks, don't be shy. Come on in. The water's fine. Nice places to sit up front. Before we start, I wanted to simply acknowledge the remarkable hard work and dedication to this process by members of our staff, not the least of whom is my friend and colleague Ginny Merriam, who has slaved over this project and really put a lot of heart into it. And speaking of hearts, we have Nancy Hart here this evening, who's also worked long and hard to bring this evening together and to bring this presentation to you. Roger Millar, our Director of the Office of Planning and Grants, and Mike Barton in our Office of Planning and Grants as well, who have all been instrumental here. And our friends at MCAT, Missoula Community Access Television, who bring you relentlessly more government programming than you ever possibly imagined could arrive in your home. Ron Scholl and the folks at MCAT did a terrific job for us here in helping us present this information. And we're live this evening. So if you'd like to speak this evening, the only caveat is that I'll ask you to use a microphone so that the folks at home can hear you as well, and your neighbors. I'd also like to thank all the folks who participated in the video that you're about to see, and our panelists as well. Tonight we have a distinguished group, and I'll introduce them after we watch the program, and give you a chance to ask them some questions, and we'll hear from them as well. With that, I'll turn it over to Roger Millar, who's got some information on the packet that you have this evening. There's a piece in there called Mayor's Affordable Housing Initiative. It says draft. There's a reason for that. There's nothing there that's set in stone, but more for us to talk about. With that, Mr. Millar.
Thank you, Mayor Ingen. Real briefly, what's in the packet? We wanted to give everybody here more information to kind of inform the discussion. At the very back of the packet is an awful lot of numbers about who is being hurt with this affordable housing problem we have, what it takes, what people make in terms of income, what 30% of that income is, and what it would take for the community to put people who are spending 30 or 50 or more % of their family income on housing, what it would take to get them back to a point where they had income that they could use for other things like food and transportation and education and the like. That's all stuff that we've developed in our office using housing and urban development data and the like. We've tried to make it real in terms of what an individual or a couple or a family in Missoula might be experiencing by putting some kind of case studies up at the very front. And that shows you for different individuals or different couples how their income is meeting or not meeting their need for housing and how that's changed over time. That's the next couple of pages. And then we also have, this is too much paper in me. We have another piece that is potential financing tools for affordable housing. As the mayor said, all of this is draft. This is intended to give you a menu of some of the tools that are used other places in the country, some of the tools that are used here in Missoula today to make affordable housing happen. There may be other tools, as the mayor indicated. If you know of some other tools, please let us know. And there is a draft document, a draft one-pager, City of Missoula Affordable Housing Program. That's what we're talking about tonight, so take a look at that and let us know what you think. Let us know if something's missing or if something that's there should be adjusted. And if you have any questions about that, please answer about any of this, please ask them tonight. And if not, get in touch with our office or the mayor's office and we'll do our best. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Roger. I appreciate that. So we have a great mix of folks here tonight. We have a number of city council folks. Thank you for coming. I've talked with all of our city council about this program. They've given me great ideas and information, and they've asked very bright questions. I know we have a number of legislators here tonight, and lots of folks who simply care about the subject or have been involved for years and years. So again, it's great to see you all. We also have, if you'd like some more information and you'd like more email in your life, you have an opportunity this evening. We have a couple of clipboards up here. You're welcome to write your email address down. We'll get a list going and be happy to send some information along to you that way if you are digitally inclined. And with that, I'll begin the video. I might ask Nancy, would you mind flipping the lights for us, please?
I've come to the conclusion that on my own, I probably won't be able to afford a home in town.
We're in a community where our wages are lower than the nation, but our housing costs are much higher.
The American dream kind of dried up with the housing and lack of salary and income.
I could pay $480 a month just in gas.
I'm Missoula Mayor John Engen, and this is a house on 2nd Street where my parents raised my brother and me. It's a great neighborhood. We're close to McCormick Park, we're close to downtown Missoula, and we're close to Willard Elementary School, a short walk away. And the neighborhood was full of kids. One of the best parts was that my parents could afford the house. My dad was a printer. My mom stayed at home and took care of the family. They paid $14,500 for this house, and they were able to make a mortgage payment of less than $100 a month without expending their entire paycheck. Today they still live in the comfort of their own home, which doubles as a nest egg for them. That was the 1960s. Today's Missoula is not the same for young families or for anyone else looking for a home.
We spent probably a year looking for a home up here before we finally decided on this. We barely looked at all in the Missoula area for that because we knew immediately that it was way out of our price range, that we were not going to be able to find anything like what we have now anywhere close to Missoula. The couple places that we did look at were over $1 million. I mean, I would look online and be like, that's what I want. All right, maybe in my next life. There's no way I'm going to be able to afford that now.
This is an average price for everywhere. You know, it's half of what the places across the road are.
Eventually, we bought it for $233. So in a 7-year time frame, it went from $67 to $233, with essentially a new roof, a new floor in the barn, and a new roof on the house.
So it's a scary proposition to deal financially, you know, and make payments, especially when the market here is seeming like it's in California. But we're not getting California jobs, and they're not California lifestyle. Like, it's still a long, cold, hard winter.
When you think about that, we're in a community where our wages are lower than the nation, but our housing costs are much higher than the nation.
Well, on a income of $54,000 at a 6% interest rate, which is the going rate right now through the Montana Board of Housing, that would limit them to about $165,000 sales price in a home. And I mean, I think we could sell those houses all day and all night, but there's just not a lot available in that price range.
You can't buy a 3-bedroom house on a first-time home buyer loan in Missoula. So we had to definitely be willing to make a lot of sacrifices. And, you know, sometimes I think I might have bit off more than I can chew, but I know that I can get it done.
People are in this community and trying to make it work. We need to provide incentives, programs, things that make it possible for those members of our community to live healthy, just like the rest of us.
I think it's a very scary process, and I think that many people are very discouraged in Missoula when it comes to purchasing a home and what they can qualify for and that mortgage payment and how much house they can actually get for their budget.
I saw 2 different times in Missoula where people at entry-level jobs could buy entry-level houses. In the one time in 1972, where I bought a nice 2-story house for $19,000. Didn't even have a job yet. And now that house is worth $220,000, $230,000. Almost have to leave the county to find enough land with low enough prices that you could provide entry-level housing.
We have seen housing prices going through the roof. About 10 years ago, in '95, you had an average housing price of roughly $130,000. That is well over $200,000 now. And if you look at a chart comparing housing prices and total housing costs versus income available, there's a huge disconnect.
That American dream of a single-family detached home is moving further and further away from the entry-level people in Missoula. Their choice then is to go to a two-family home, which is a single building with two homes in it, and that's fast moving out of their reach. And then we go to multifamily, which is 3 or more. So we're talking 4-unit buildings, 5-unit, 6-unit, or 8-unit buildings that could be apartment homes and you simply rent. We need to be honest about this and come up with a solution so people have the opportunity to make the choice of whether to buy a dwelling unit, no matter whether it's single-family detached or in a multifamily building.
You know, one of the beauties of Missoula is that it's home to a variety of folks. People here are old and young, poor and rich, white collar and blue collar. They work as mechanics, doctors, teachers, store clerks, university professors, office staff, engineers, lifeguards, and a variety of other jobs. And we like that diversity. It makes our community real and interesting. But in the last couple of years, we've heard that recruiting employees is starting to become a challenge.
And it might be surprising to people that it's hard for people that are recruited by an engineering firm or a high-end technology firm. It's hard for those folks to find a place to live here. So after we show them Karis Park and take them around and show them what a great place to Missoula is to live, they go visit a realtor and find out they actually can't afford it on this good professional salary that they're being recruited for. This is a big issue if we want to build an entrepreneurial economy.
Wages for that type of talent, while competitive, I think become uncompetitive once you factor in the housing costs and you compare Missoula to some other communities, even metropolitan areas where housing can be substantially cheaper.
Employees remark to us their level of surprise and challenge to find affordable housing, despite being paid what they know to be market wages. I really wonder if we're just on the edge of having to take a more proactive stance relative to affordable housing. And we'd like to be part of some kind of community conversation or solution to creating a strategy so that we don't have to lose potential new employees.
Things are changing now. We have officers coming in here that are getting paid an awful lot more money now than what we were paid in those days. And they're getting actually pretty good pay. But they're still in the situation that they cannot afford a home in Missoula on a single income.
I was kind of assuming that Missoula, it's a smaller town, smaller than Spokane from where I was at, and that the housing would probably be cheaper. I've come to the conclusion that on my own, I probably won't be able to afford a home in town and still be able to support myself.
Beginning teachers who come out of the University of Montana and go through the job recruitment fair are often siphoned off to other states that pay higher wages and have lower housing prices. And it breaks my heart to see those people having to go to Washington and California and Las Vegas and Wyoming in order to make a living.
In big American cities, you hear people talk about drive time and windshield time. That's not something that's been a household word for Montanans, but it's getting more common to hear people talk about their 1-hour drive or even longer. Some people want to live in the country, and that's fine. But when too many people have to commute a long way to work, it erodes our quality of life.
Everything's a drive.
Of course, with the price of gas now, people who think they're saving by buying a house 30 or 40 miles from Missoula discover once they drive back and forth for a year or so on the wear and tear on the vehicles and the gas prices that they're not saving money.
You know, if I drive my 85 truck that gets 10 miles to the gallon, I could pay $480 a month just in gas.
I was new to the area, living in Montana for 4 short years when I first moved here, and I just wasn't exploring Montana at all. You know, you'd get home after work, and after a long commute, And the last thing that you want to do is drive into Missoula to participate in any sort of community events.
Teachers are better if they live in the community in which they teach. Teachers should be invested in their community. They should live here, participate in the economics, in the available arts and education opportunities, particularly in Missoula. And if you're living out of town, you spend an awful lot of time getting back and forth.
I think if we keep displacing people and make Missoula more and more a business center only, we all suffer. And we will probably then start losing things like the downtown events that are put on, especially in the summer, because it becomes uneconomical to commute a fairly long distance to participate in a 1 hour or 2 hour event in the evening.
It used to be we had a requirement to live within 4 air miles of the city limits. And due to the lack of affordable housing within that 4 air miles, it was changed to a 30-minute response time. And so now on Interstate 90 at 75 miles an hour, officers can live up to 30 minutes out, which puts you quite a ways out. You could actually live in Alberton.
The unfortunate thing is, typically, in the history of our department, our firefighters lived within the city limits. They lived in Missoula, and they were an integral part of Missoula and the community they protect. And that is something that is changing. Obviously, if somebody lives in Florence or Stevensville, they don't have the same ties to our community.
High housing prices affect more than our family budget. Now, my brother and I walked to Willard School when we were kids, but Willard is no longer the neighborhood school. Neither is Jefferson or Whittier or Central or half a dozen others. Neighborhoods aren't the same when housing prices are out of reach of young families and their children.
The American dream kind of dried up with the housing and lack of salary and income. So I would love to have an older house that has a basement and a washer and dryer that you don't have to put quarters into anymore, a yard, and a garage. You know, nothing huge, just something comfortable with trees. So that's my goal, but it seems like it's getting further and further away.
Me, I knew I wanted to live in Missoula area. It's where my community and kind of where my heart was set for a long time.
The faces of affordable housing are people that we meet every day when we go shopping and when we go to get our physical checkup, when we go to the restaurants and things like that.
We want to see people in our community stable. And we all love to live in Missoula, and we're all here for a reason. And if we don't have the people to work in hotels, motels, CNAs, young first-time teachers, bank tellers, people that work at the gas station, a whole number of what we call service-oriented employment, if we're not providing support for those people, both either through affordable rentals, but also through eventual home ownership, so they can build equity, buy a home, become a homeowner, move into middle class, we are losing out on why we love Missoula so much.
A lot of us who grew up in Montana have to leave home to make enough money to move back, and the thought that it's our workforce, they're our neighbors. It's not. We have to have that diversity that Betsy talked about with the type of housing, because it's impossible to think that the grocery store clerks, the bankers, the firemen, we can't survive as a community without them.
And when people understand that Missoula is a larger community than just their front porch or just their neighborhood, they'll take responsibility for that.
We all live here and we all have something to offer. But when you have a taste of that ownership, and when you have a stake in something that your hands are in and something that you're making better or you're contributing to, it really allows you to open up your field of view and view the whole town as a community instead of just bits and pieces.
You know, I think it's very unfortunate that people that work for the city can't afford to live in the city. I think that we should do all we possibly can to reverse that trend.
We've just heard from a lot of folks in a short time. They've told us that high and rising housing costs in Missoula are challenging us in recruitment of workers and in economic development. Our housing prices are changing the quality of life of our city and causing some folks to wonder whether they can stay here and call Missoula their home for living and for working. The price of a single-family home is now out of reach for more than 3/4 of us, and that's just not acceptable. If Missoula values housing affordability and the vitality and diversity that it brings to our community, we must take action. During my lifetime, the community has come together to clean up our air, to protect our sole source aquifer, and to preserve our open spaces. And I know that we're capable of bringing the same level of effort and cooperation to bear on our community's housing problems. We need to ask ourselves some important questions as a community, and I think we need to answer those questions as well. There's no cookie-cutter approach. So identifying who needs affordable housing in our community is one of the first steps in really trying to build a program in Missoula so that folks can achieve the American dream. We need to work together as a community to decide where affordable housing and some other housing is appropriate. We also need to talk about what it looks like. We're talking about homes that folks can be proud of, that appreciate and value, that add to community. And finally, we need to ask a difficult question: how do we as a community help pay for affordable housing? And these are all very challenging questions, but I think Missoula is up to the task, and we'll be continuing to talk with folks throughout the community so that more of us can participate fully in our community through equity in housing. And the credits have rolled, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to introduce our panel this evening, and I have notes here so that I don't err in any important ways. We'll start over here with Chad Nicholson. Chad's in his 17th year as a city firefighter, and he's only 24, so we may have to figure out the math there. Chad was president of Firefighters Local 271 for 4 years, and his term ended in February. Grew up in a ranching family outside Arlee, and he and his wife and 2 boys live in a house near the Y that they bought 12 years ago after living in a basement apartment and saving money for 4 years, something no longer possible today. We'll move next is Rachel Bemis. Rachel works as a real estate loan officer at the credit union. She was kind enough to lend her services to our video. She describes in this movie she bought her first home a year and a half ago through the land stewardship program in the North Missoula Community Development Corporation. She's lived in Montana for 5.5 years and is a board member of NMCDC. So Bob, be careful. Perry Ashby, ladies and gentlemen, has been a builder for 31 years, and again, you can't be more than, well, 29 is the number. Perry founded his company Westmont Builders 14 years ago and serves as the president of Westmont. He builds primarily affordable houses in communities that Westmont creates. Among them are Canyon Creek Village and Bridgecourt Village on Spurgeon Road, and he's been committed to building with a traditional neighborhood feel and has built more than 500 homes for regular folks in the workforce. And has served as a member of my housing team. And finally, our friend Nancy Hart who's a grants administrator and a general do-gooder at the Missoula Office of Planning and Grants, where she's worked for more than 10 years and administers our federal home investment partnerships program, which provides funds for low and moderate income households and includes first-time home buyers assistance, which is critical. She also works on the development of such projects as Clark Fork Commons, the SEM, and Cove Apartments. Nancy's a Montana native, a Missoula homeowner who credits the equity built by purchasing her first home 25 years ago for $30,000 with being able to remain a homeowner today. So those are our panelists this evening and their stories. And why don't we start on this end with Chad, and you're welcome to speak as long or as short as you'd like, and then we'll open it up for discussion and questions. I will ask that you just tap the button which turns on your microphone. There you go, Chad. You're in the driver's seat now.
Just where I want to be. Like Mayor Ingen said, I've worked for the city for almost 17 years, not quite yet. And the issue of affordable housing has been a concern of all the firefighters for the last 7 to 10 years, especially. We're talking about our contract negotiations are coming up pretty soon here, and a lot of my guys are telling me that their income is disposable income is less than it was 4 years ago, and really housing is one of the biggest contributors to that. And the trends are a lot of our younger guys, especially if they're starting families, are moving out of Missoula. They're moving to Florence, they're moving to Lolo, and what they're finding is the house that they can qualify for, a $160,000 house, they can buy a lot more house in Florence, Lolo, Arlee than they can right here in town. And that's the choices they're making. They're moving out of town. And we don't want to see our firefighters leave the community. We want to keep them here. But the reality is that's what they're doing to support their families. I guess I'm a little worried too that what disposable income they did have is now getting squeezed by groceries and gas and the same thing I guess we're all living with, but it's definitely getting tighter and tighter for all of our guys. And almost all of our younger guys, well, a lot of our firemen are double income families. That's how everybody's making it, is with 2 incomes. Even our single guys, if they get into the housing market, it's with renting out a room, some creative kind of ways to make ends meet and get into the housing market. So I don't know if the labor market around here ever tightened up. I think we'd have firemen that probably couldn't make it without a second income. I know they couldn't make their house payments. And so we're worried about our economy. We're worried about the situation we're in, and our guys, that's what they're worried about, is losing one part of their income could make it where they couldn't afford their mortgage, where they're currently set right now. And so I don't know, I guess I'm here just to put a face on probably the average worker in Missoula.
Thank you, Chad. I appreciate that. Rachel.
Everyone can hear me? Okay. Thanks for having me. One thing that I'd like to touch on is that I moved here about 5.5 years ago, and I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud, but from California. And one of the reasons that I moved here was I was in my young 20s and wanted homeownership to be a possibility, and it wasn't a possibility where I lived in Southern California. Little did I know I was coming to Missoula with the same issues. I feel very optimistic. I'm a real estate lender, so I see first-time home buyers on a regular basis, and I feel very encouraged that affordable housing is definitely a huge issue, but there are some great programs out there. If we just get more programs out there that can assist the first-time home buyers, like myself, I purchased a home through the land stewardship, which was the only possibility for me. It was either renting for 5 to 10 years or jump into this position where I was able to afford a home. And now I'm not paying my landlord's mortgage, I'm paying my mortgage. So I definitely think from an optimistic standpoint that there are options out there. We just need more. And we just need to work together to make those available. And I think educate the public as well. I think there's a huge gap between, you know, folks that are under that 80% median income, you know, under 31,000. You know, it's those people that there's assistance for. But what about the folks that are making 40 or 50,000 that still can't afford the homes that are available in Missoula? So I think it's really important to address that as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. Perry?
Testing. Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm Perry Ashby, and first of all, I wanted to thank a true visionary standing up here next to us. The mayor has, in the 14 years I have been here, he is one individual who I have seen that has really taken a leadership role in trying to tackle this very complex problem that we're discussing here tonight. And I think as a member, I feel honored to be a member of the Housing Task Force team. We're a very diverse group. I mean, it's made up of about 10 to 15 individuals, some market rate for-profit individuals, some nonprofit individuals, regulatory people, and so on. But the goal is a community collective effort. The goal is everything that's been evidenced here tonight, at least up until this point, or referenced, that we want to see workforce housing maintained at some level that is reasonable to the individuals who we have that make up a very important part of this community. And it's becoming extremely unachievable for many individuals, and that's evidenced more in statistics than anything else. I mean, there are stories, but the statistics tell a lot of that, and that's that nationally, housing ownership is approximately 69%. Locally, we're approximately 50%. And so we need to figure out a way to raise the bar and raise that opportunity for those individuals to get at least a little bit closer to that national average. And so tonight, it's essentially a forum, a dialogue forum, an opportunity for those of us to chat about this as a community issue.
Thank you, Perry. Ms. Hart.
Thank you, Mary Engen. It's my honor to work as a staff person in a combined city-county office and be able to work with the type of leadership that we've had with the mayor and with the Board of County Commissioners and the City Council. It's a cooperative effort, and the problem sometimes seems overwhelming. We have sort of a saying in grants, which is where I work, where we write grants to try to get money to bring in to help various programs in Missoula. And our saying basically is that the worse it is, the better it is for grants. We like to see high poverty rates. I mean, it just sounds contrary, but it's like, you know, you get the grants that well. Only this time it becomes a little more overwhelming. When you start looking at the actual numbers and you know all the faces that go with it. I've been working with housing issues at the city and county for over 10 years. And, you know, you look at numbers that you see in these handouts, and they're kind of cause you to glaze over a little bit. But the thing you need to remember is that each one of those is an individual, and it's really nice to see that there's a discussion beginning to see how we're going to address some of the needs of people from all ranges of income who are finding housing such a challenge in Missoula.
Thank you very much, Nancy. One of the ways, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, that we're raising money this evening for affordable housing is all of you who are sitting in the green or the charcoal colored chairs, those were free. The folks sitting along this wall in the expensive chairs that the city council is test driving, they paid a little extra for that comfort. So Mr. King, thank you very much for your contribution this evening. We appreciate that. Test driving, indeed. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard a lot so far, and now we'd like to hear from you. I'm going to swing around here. Melissa Gordon has kindly volunteered to take notes, and oh, she left? Well, I get a lot of that. Well, at some point, someone will be here to take some notes so that we record what you all have to say, and I'll just walk around with a microphone. What I'll probably do in the interest of time is repeat your question for the sake of the microphone, but please, or your answer for that matter. So please, anyone who'd like to start, just raise your hand for me, and I'll step right up. Mr. Taft.
I'm Alex Taft from the University District, and I wanted to mention a tool that might be a solution, and it's called Location Efficient Mortgages. Basically, it says if you live where there's good transit and you can bike and walk to work and shopping, that you can save on your transportation costs, i.e. you don't need a car or you don't need two cars, you only need one car. And if you take those operating expenses for a year of operating that car that you don't need, and put that into your mortgage payments, you can get a higher mortgage, therefore either have a lower down payment or can afford a higher price house. And as a member of the Transit Board, I can tell you we have a very good transit system here. Our ridership has gone up 60% in the last 15 years, 6% just in the last year. We have very good biking and walking neighborhoods, so I think we might be a community that where this might work. And I have a sheet which I'll give you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. All the way in the back. Mr. Erickson. Ron, if you just, we have two mics? No, we couldn't afford that.
Ron Erickson, House District 93. I wanted to comment on one of the lists that's out here, real estate transfer tax. You'll see it in your handout. And what they're asking for here is enabling legislation, a 1% real estate transfer tax with a $500,000 minimum threshold would generate $2 million a year. That has always seemed to me to be a good idea. The bill that I tried in the legislature last time was not for local option, it was rather statewide. It would have generated $14 million, and all the money would have gone into a revolving loan account with the same idea, but it would have been a statewide account. Here's the problem. The realtors don't like it. And what I want to ask the realtors to think about is to look ahead enough to say that it's going to be good for this community, it's going to be good for the state. Any legislator who's over there is going to be willing to work with the real estate industry for assurances that their problem, what they say is, oh, it'll start as nothing under $500,000 is taxed, but it'll move over time. Suddenly, the $200,000 house would be taxed. Well, we can write legislation that would not allow that to happen easily. And so I beg you, any of you who know somebody in real estate, and all the real estate people who are here, think seriously about this particular solution. I think that a lot of us think it's a good solution.
Rebuttal. Yes, sir.
I would, first of all, just to state how impressed I am by this meeting. I think it's impressive to have so many folks gathered on this issue. I work on housing issues, improving housing choices for people with disabilities, including our seniors statewide, and this is probably the best community turnout I've ever seen in a meeting anywhere. I would just applaud your efforts to create welcoming community for all at every income level in the Missoula community. And Missoula has always been leaders in creating affordable housing. You have so many vibrant affordable housing organizations that are truly leaders statewide and across the country. I would take some time to really consider, in terms of your handouts, making certain that you're being very inclusive in representing all of the community, and in your excellent video as well, is that we need that unless we're providing people the true face of all needs in the community, those needs may be lost. And so the needs of our seniors living on fixed incomes, the needs of people with disabilities who are living on fixed incomes, the needs of single-parent families who living on very small incomes. And because first and foremost, housing is a basic need, and we cannot lose sight of that. I would draw your attention just to that thought, who do we consciously or unconsciously exclude from housing in our community if we don't do that? In the area of design, I would encourage and recognize that it's a current need today in terms of enhanced accessibility, and that although Missoula has always been a lower percentage of seniors, it's because of the university, it always has a younger population, that won't always be the case, and that the population of people over 65 will double here in the next 10 or 15 years. And so that I would ask that you look at issues like visitability, which is a very simple step just to include some requirements that to eliminate on every home built, no step entrance, a hallway that you can get through, a bathroom door that's at least 32 inches, very simple steps so that truly housing can be welcoming to all. I would encourage strategic planning that coordinate affordable housing with services and transportation and employment opportunities. And once again, to incorporate planning for our aging demographic, because that is going to be the big change. And one area of solution that I would suggest, you have a great comprehensive list, but looking at those zoning changes, and I'm not intimately involved with your zoning here in Missoula, but that looking at things like fundamentally the cost of land is the biggest challenge. So increasing, to a slight degree, lot coverage ratios, side front requirements, and basically lot size coverage, slightly increased building heights, allowing for small duplexes or fourplexes within single family zones, things along that nature. But once again, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you very much.
I'm Dennis Danicki with Carpenters Union, and I don't know much about economics. I'm just an old nail bender. Maybe someone in this room could enlighten me a little bit more. But if there is so much demand for these lower priced homes, how come the market isn't supplying them? I would presume that there are some sort of obstacles in the way, and perhaps you could do your third campaign issue and look at the regulations that may have been impeding some of this work. And because I always thought that give the market the first chance. If they can't do it, we'll move on to Plan B.
Thank you. My name is Mary Monroe. I work for Fidelity Real Estate, but I'm also a single mom with 2 kids who is a recipient of the Missoula Housing Authority, which I'm a big advocate of here in the community. I feel very passionately about low-income and moderate-income families from firsthand experience, and I'm thrilled about this meeting tonight. As a realtor, I don't make a lot of money because I try and help people who are trying to get into homes, so I cut some of my fees, which I'd like to see happen more often in the community. But anyway, I'm one of these people that you're talking about. Can't afford a home, single mom with 2 kids, and would love to see some changes.
I'll be at the salad bar later.
I don't work there anymore.
Get out. Good food store.
Yeah.
He seen me at the salad bar. It scared him off.
I'm just glad you're eating well. Yeah. On the issue of economics, that's yeah, I think that's a pretty critical thing to point out. And on what you said about higher buildings and slightly more density in the name of multifamily dwelling units and duplexes and such like that, I think that's definitely something that just by basic laws of economics will bring down cost to a certain extent. And I realize that particularly in this community, when people come to Montana, they're generally thinking of having their own home with their own yard, and while that's a reasonable goal, I think quality of life can definitely be preserved with multifamily units, and even apartment complexes that that encompass a green space that has a shared park, shared playground of some sort. Yeah, I think definitely there has been a tendency to view density as automatically bad. That it attracts a decay of community involvement, and but that certainly doesn't ever have to be the case. In many cases, it can increase community involvement because people do live closer together and people cross paths more often. And if it's just designed properly, you can bring down the cost and have that greater community interaction.
Ms. Miller.
Debbie Miller. I'm a social worker at Salvation Army, and I'm a board of commissioner at the Missoula Housing Authority. And my first question is, why is there a lack of affordable housing? What's the number one cause? And I think it's because of the high cost of housing here. And who created that? Who created that? The realtors, or am I wrong? I think you need to start there. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't mean to put anybody down, but if you're going to hem and haw around the fact that high cost of housing comes from the realtors, you're not going to fix the problem until you can work with that. And not only that, but I'm wondering, and I don't know that much about government and everything, but I'm wondering to what degree can your housing task force create affordable housing with any funds like from HUD, like Missoula Housing, and what could we do to work together to, that's what I'm interested in. But my first thing is, there's not going to be any change in affordable housing until the prices come down. It doesn't matter what you talk about. And I have to also say, as a side note, Missoula has the highest rate of homeless families than anywhere else in the state. Did you know that? And talking about a quality of life, you have to encompass the whole population, not just people who are working. Because these are people who have children. I was almost homeless on the street with my little girls 2 weeks before my voucher from public housing came in. And that's why I want to be a board member, to say thank you, because I was grateful. But not everybody gets that lucky. There's lots of families that come to Salvation Army that the sidewalk is their house. And it's a major problem. But if we work together, and I don't know what you need to do to go after the realtors, what you could do legally or in the legislature, but I would, because I don't see the prices coming down unless we do something as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. And I can tell you that as much as I think they'd like to take the blame for high housing costs, because commissions would be better, I'm not sure realtors can take the heat, but certainly the market can, and the market is part of what the issue is. So I appreciate your point about that. Ripley, did I see you? What do you think? You ready?
I wanted to, because we've been talking about the attitudes towards people in the area, something has to be done about all the people in our community who don't give a fig about the homeless. May I say that?
You did.
I mean, there's some way to be, if they can't be gotten at because we have the highest rate of homeless in the state, and they can't be appealed to because I don't like to drive by certain places every day and see how much people can't even touch those houses. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on John?
Well, John Wilkins, I am a city councilman. I represent Ward 4. I think the biggest disappointment I heard this year was the program for the first home buyer, the new home buyer, that we could only help one home buyer in Missoula this year because of the federal money that we got. You know, Ron, Let them know. We can't take that. We need more federal money, especially for them type of programs. That's really discouraging, that we can fight this fabulous war that we're fighting, but we can't fight our war at home with our homeless and our people that need a little help, first home buyers. The other thing I think is really important is to keep what we got and not lose what we got. Keep the character of our neighborhoods. They're vibrant. That's why we're called the Garden City. Keep the garden in our city. I don't have the answers to affordable homes. I got 2 kids that maybe one will do it because he'll end up being a doctor at one time, but he won't be coming back to Missoula. Unfortunately, he'll be out east somewhere. I got one that's in Missoula, that's a sophomore now in college. Probably going to be a social worker, like her mom. I don't see her affording a house here in Missoula. Not at the prices. Maybe I'll die and I'll give her my house. That's probably my goal in my head. So I don't know what we're going to do. I don't have the answers, but I'd sure like to hear the answers. But I think a little more federal help in Missoula, Montana to help some of these programs is very important. And you need to get a hold of your legislators for that.
Thank you, Councilman. Ms. Clemens?
Hi. When I grew up here in Missoula, up the Rattlesnake, it was up by Lincoln School, and it was really beautiful and open. Now it's really filled in, and they're building around Lincoln School with a PNC, which has created a lot of flap. And looking at all of the reality checks in our housing market, tonight they said on national news foreclosures are up 60% from last year. Inflation, food, gas, health costs, heating costs are way, way up, and we all know that. How can we help people on subsidized housing cope with this exponential increase in costs? Once they get into a house, that's not the kicker. The kicker is, how do you make all of your property tax wait? We're going to put bonds out there for a city police station, that right? There's a county one. There's a school board bond coming up, the affordable housing bond. There's a possible performing arts center. There are maintenance districts, lighting districts, local SIDs. And overall, if you actually study it, the taxes that I have paid between 93 and now have gone up 6% a year between the county, the SIDs, and the city. This is not affordable. It's not affordable for anybody who gets into a house. They can't make it. We are going to have a lot more people going into foreclosure in Missoula than we know about. One realtor told me back in October he was listing 4 houses in 3 days that were in foreclosure. If we think that the local houses we're immune to the foreclosure market, we're not. It's out there, and we need the city government to be extremely frugal. Before you pass bonds, evaluate what people can actually pay. And maybe we could take all of the housing people in the city, all of the different entities, meld them into one, streamline them, get rid of all of the duplication of administrative costs, and get a lot more for our money. Scary thing, Montana Board of Housing, State Board of Housing, announced that it's only got 2 more weeks that it'll give out first-time mortgage money. That was yesterday in the news. We're in trouble.
On my way.
My name's Steve Loken. I'm a builder here in Missoula, and there's a few builders around here that I wanted to thank for trying to do a job with their businesses to make affordable housing. It's really tough to do. We can build affordable housing, but we can't find affordable land to put it on. And we have to also pay help. So there's a whole bunch of things involved in affordable housing and just housing in general. First of all, city requires cities, roads, sewer, water, gas, setbacks, respect for your neighbors, fences, and parking. Those are things that we all enjoy in our homes. I've remodeled a lot of homes in Missoula that are 70, 80 years old. And a lot of the houses that were built in Missoula 70, 80 years ago were built by the people who lived in them. They salvaged materials, they had no money, and they had some time, and they put their own houses together because they could only afford that. Today, very few of us in this room either have the skill sets or the time to be able to put your own home together. So, the builders and myself in this room who hire people, we try to find people that are qualified, and we can't pay them $7 an hour. We can't pay them $9 an hour. We have to pay them $12, $14, $17, $18 an hour so that they will work to build houses. Small, affordable, big, expensive, but they have skill sets. If we don't pay them that much, they won't work for us. They will find somewhere else to go. Demographically, young people today don't choose construction. They choose banking, real estate, pharmacy. They choose something else because they can make a lot more money. So we're kind of caught in between here. We as builders have to be able to pay the trades decent wages so that they will work for us to build houses for you and meet all the requirements that you want in your homes. Guys like Perry and others in this room are trying to squank this formula down to get hard cost housing that's 70, 80, 90,000 bucks. We can do that, a house. Then we have to find land to put it on and meet the other requirements and regulations. So I have a kind of a new formula that I'd like to present that's not in the potential financial tools list that you have here, John. And I believe that unless people are willing to participate more in the construction of their own homes to reduce the costs, because they're hard costs that have to be met, that I think we need to go to cooperative housing, because the cost of infrastructure, concrete foundations, concrete, steel, wood, all these things are expensive and getting more so, that we need to cluster our houses. We need to change our zoning so we have more infill in neighborhoods, so you can still have gardens, but I think we're going to need more infill. This community is still a juvenile, and we're heading in towards our late teens. As we grow and mature, we have to be dense. We have to go vertically. This multi-story, multi-family thing that we just passed down to the Champion property is a really good sign. The footprint stays the same. You put more people and you stack them vertically. We can do this well. With good designs, we can make it look good, operate efficiently. So I'd like to propose, John, here that I have the 9 sheets here on cooperative housing, which means a nonprofit organization or a group of people elect a board of directors. They build it, they own it, they rule it, and the people who are in the houses, the apartments, the condominiums, own them. They can sell them, and the association buys them back. So you always have a buyer, you always have people who are willing to sell, and in a cooperative, you can limit the equity, so that each year you're getting your equity back plus maybe only 2 or 3%, and you're not like worried about whether or not you can afford a house that's appreciating at 14 to 18% per year. So I'll give him and all of you here this housing cooperative formula. It's all over the Midwest. New York City itself is full of housing cooperatives because it's the only way people can afford to live there and use their equity wisely. It's coming this way. Montana has no cooperative housing opportunities yet, but I think as an association, this community, we're really quite ready for it. The other thing I'd like to say is in these multifamily and cooperative housing projects, you can have affordable housing in Missoula, but then you may not be able to afford your utility bill. I've been hearing $300 and $400 a month this winter for heating and heating costs and lighting in houses. So when you do multifamily, you're automatically making sure those buildings are more efficient because there's less skin exposed to the exterior elements for heating and cooling. Another big issue with affordable housing is how in the hell are you going to stay comfortable in the winter and summer. So I'd like to give you this, John, this housing cooperative, and put that on your list as one of the other financial tools. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Torma.
Thank you for holding this conversation, Mayor Engen. My name is John Torma. I live in the University neighborhood. I think one thing that we've learned as we wrestle with this issue over the years is that there is no silver bullet, and that's what we're hearing again tonight, that we have to have many, many tools in our toolbox. The focus of this conversation tonight and your work has been, and I think this is appropriate, on the first-time home buyer. And I know that hasn't been your sole focus, and I guess I want to speak to the other end of that spectrum. As my hair has gotten progressively grayer over the years, I have a tendency to look at this in terms of the folks at the other end of the age spectrum. And there are some of the same issues and some different issues. One of the different issues is there are a lot of older folks, a lot of seniors who are in their own house and have been for years and are now finding it very difficult to stay in their own home. And I think there are tools that we have to make sure are in our toolbox that help those folks do that. When I turned 55, I got my invitation to join AARP, and I did. I wasn't always impressed with that organization, but I've become impressed with them. I think they've done some really good work for our community in general and seniors specifically. One of the tools that the AARP strongly recommends as a useful tool in communities to help elders stay in their home is a term, I almost hate to bring it up because it's been a very scary term in this community and in my neighborhood, but I think it shouldn't be, and that's the accessory dwelling unit, okay? There are many communities that have adopted this tool as a tool not only for helping seniors stay in their home, but also for helping young families get into a home. And as we go into the rewrite of our zoning regulations, I would really urge our Affordable Housing Commission and the city staff and all of us in this room to think seriously about that as a tool that will help people get into their home and people who are in a home to stay in their home. And we can do it in such a way that it doesn't compromise positive neighborhood character. A lot of communities have done that, and I think we can do that as well. Another useful thing that it does for us is it helps distribute affordable housing options for people throughout the community. Helps provide affordable housing options in all neighborhoods, and thus helps us avoid the ghettoization of any group of people, whether it be the ghettoization of wealthy folks or the ghettoization of middle or lower income folks. And quite frankly, I guess another reason why I think accessory dwelling units shouldn't be a scary thing is because it's not anything new to us in Missoula. Accessory dwelling units have been a part of the fabric of our neighborhoods from day one in Missoula. If you walk through the university neighborhood, there are accessory dwelling units all over the place. I don't think we want to just open the floodgates and say, sure, let's do them anywhere, anytime, any place. I think we have to do it sensibly, and I think we have the opportunity in our zoning rewrite right now to tailor this tool so it helps us provide housing and preserve neighborhoods.
Doing fine. I'm Andrea Dahl. I work with Summit Independent Living Center. Our focus at Summit is helping people with disabilities in the community, and one of my hats is housing. It's a very frustrating process here because visitability hardly exists here. Finding homes that a person who suddenly acquired a disability where they're using a wheelchair, and they can't get in and out of their own home, so they have to give up their home. But now they have to go look for a rental unit, and finding one that they can get their chair in and out of is a real hard project. And although we do have some services in this community now so that they can do adaptations to homes, it's still, the cost is a lot more than people who are now living on a disability check can really afford. So it's another area to look at.
I'm Susan Kohler. I'm with Missoula Aging Services. I'm glad to hear several people here representing seniors. I like to refer to it as the silver tsunami that's coming into our state and to the community in terms of us baby boomers. And I guess one of the things I was wondering, of course, on several fronts is, has anybody cared to ask what kind of housing would maybe people be willing or interested in living in? I like Mr. Logan's idea of co-ops. It's been long coming, and I don't know why developers haven't picked up. Senior housing co-ops have been going on for quite some time, and they're affordable. One of the things that I'm disappointed in is that often seniors will sell their homes to go into some of these housing complexes, not the subsidized ones, and they're living a lot longer than the previous generations, and they're getting to the point they're renting. They have no control over the rent. It continues to escalate to the point where they may have lived there 15 or 20 years, and they're going to have to look at relocating to a subsidized housing complex later in their life because they're running out of resources. The fact that the only options they have is to rent in order to get services is a problem. When they sell their homes. I think another option would be, again, a volunteer corps that would take a look at some of the things that were elders trying to stay in their own homes, what might seem simple, like raking leaves, mowing lawns, snow removal, changing a light bulb in the house when it goes out, safety issues, that we could get community members around to help elders stay in their own homes would be a good thing. And I think that the other challenge we have is that service providers for people who are staying in their homes, their wages are low, and our workforce is going to be nowhere near adequate to meet the silver tsunami demands. There's going to be a lot less workers, and I think we really have to take a look at that particular issue too, as it pertains to housing and transportation. I don't have the answers, but I think there's some models out there that have been mentioned today that I'd really like us to look at, because seniors can start out affording and have their home, but over time they can't keep up with the repairs or are able to maintain their own existence. And selling and moving into a rental environment after owning for 40 years or more is just a wrong approach. The last thing is that there's no subsidized assisted living. And a lot of people who do choose to move from their homes, elders, are because they're at that point where they need additional help and support. And unless they have good incomes, there isn't a subsidized system for assisted living. So we really have to look at how in our affordable housing we're going to be able to provide that level of service too.
Thanks very much, Susan. Yeah, Aging Services is helping me with that very problem today. So, thank you, Lori. It's a good thing you have a pointer with you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have seen you. Thanks, Marty.
Hi, I'm Lori Davidson. I'm the acting director of the Housing Authority. And a lot of our conversation tonight has focused on home buyers and first-time home buyers, and that's a great thing. That is a goal that I think everybody aspires to. It's important to keep in mind that affordable rental housing is as big an issue in Missoula as affordable home buyer, housing for home buyers is. The Housing Authority tries to serve people at 30% of median income, some of the poorest folks, and that gets more and more difficult to do every single day. And I literally mean every day, because we get notices from HUD, who provides most of our funding for public housing in Section 8. We get notices from them every day about cuts coming along. We struggle with that continuously. I'm really encouraged by all of the planning efforts that we're doing in town. I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, and the Office of OPG and the Downtown Business District, because I'm really encouraged by all these planning efforts. They're great. They're long overdue. They're much needed and much welcomed. And as we continue that conversation, I hope that everybody will take the opportunity to get involved in those, because it really is about consensus and community building. And I also would like to invite people and encourage people to think about not what we can't do in the community, but what we can do. If you represent a neighborhood and you have very strong feelings about how to keep the integrity of that neighborhood, that's a great thing. And the zoning committee is looking at things like conservation districts for neighborhoods to preserve their character. And as you think about what works in your neighborhood, what could we do in your neighborhood to make higher density or more affordable housing acceptable? Would design standards help? Is there a certain area of your neighborhood where it would be okay to put some higher density housing? You know, maybe closer to a borderline area where there's maybe a commercial district or something on one side. But think about, rather than what you want to try and keep out of your neighborhood, what kinds of things you could invite in and what would be acceptable for you, and what would make it acceptable for you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yep.
Good evening. My name is Kimberly Chambers, and I am a contractor here that has relationships with many of you in the room. Missoula Housing Authority has been one, Dave Edgell, Perry Ashby, and the MBIA, and more. I have to start by not causing a conflict, but letting you know that the real estate agents really aren't completely the problem. They do get the target on their head, and they're usually the easiest people to hit with. What we are faced with right now in Missoula is that when a developer buys a piece of land, they are up to almost 24 months of holding that land after they've paid for the full price, going through the process of protest and engineering, and getting to finally a acceptable set of plans so that they could go in and develop. We have a lot of protesting, and this is probably one of the few times I've been in this room where everyone has smiles and an opinion that's very positive, and it's very nice to be in here and hear this, because we do need to do something. We have families, we have single moms, we have single dads, we have firefighters. Matter of fact, our subdivision out in East Missoula has 3 police officers and 2 firemen and several nurses living out there, and they are the starting home population. What we need to look at is trying to educate the neighbors that I know you might not want it in your backyard, but we all are here for a reason, and we all need to care about the people that we love and the community that we love, and we need to come together and figure that we've spent our money on our open spaces. We might need to give up some gardens, but we need to take care of our people, and we are very willing to do that. I know Perry has, David has, and I have. And Steve, you have too. I didn't mean to leave you out over there. So thank you very much for this group, and please talk to your neighbors.
Thank you, Kim. The smiles are all about the cookies, I think, and we may have to have those at every meeting. Sir, Mr. Grimm. OSHA prevented from throwing microphones.
I'm Doug Grimm, and I don't represent anybody, sorry. I've been in Montana practically all my life, except for a short time when I graduated from college and headed off to the big city of New York. And I hadn't lived there very long until there was a story on the front page of the New York Times. Some people, probably some greenhorns from maybe some part of Montana, had decided they wanted to live in Manhattan, and there just wasn't any place to live. So they went to the city council or whoever it was that's in charge of the city and said, we need some land in Central Park, and we want to build a big building and have a place. You're not using all of the park, so let's put something in that area that isn't being used. And this went on for several weeks until they were finally, got the idea that they weren't going to part with any of that land in Central Park for housing. It's sometimes I wonder, it's too bad that Missoula can't consider that it's all filled in and there is no more space. But I'm kind of curious, where is it written that the people of Missoula has to provide a house for everyone who comes down the pike and says, oh, this is where I want to live? I've asked that several times, and I haven't been able to get an answer from anybody. But when I lived in New York, it was the early 1960s, and I lived in Greenwich Village, an apartment building, and I had a two-room pad, and it was about $200, which seemed pretty darn expensive. Too expensive for me to afford by myself, so I had two guys for roommates. And then I went back to that same apartment building 2 years ago, and they said that my room that was $200 and some was well over $1,000 now. But when I lived there, when I was leaving in 1967, I met some people who lived on the corner of the building, and they looked out over two streets, Waverly and some other street, and I got to talking to them. They invited me in to see their apartment. They had the corner room, plus a bedroom over on one side and another bedroom over on the other side, plus a kitchen. And I said, my God, how much does this cost you to rent this beautiful corner place on the 6th or the 9th floor? And they said, well, it's $25. I was astounded and really upset that I was paying, quite a bit more for the two little rooms that I had. So I said, well, how could you possibly get this for $25? Well, right after World War II, rent started to just skyrocket in New York City, so the people that were running the city decided that they would institute something called rent control. And so they immediately froze all rents to which you were paying at that point, and you could not raise it. So they had been living in that apartment since 1945. And now it was 1967, and the landlord could not raise the rent. The city, I don't know if the city of New York still follows that program or not, but I know in 1967 there was a lot of talk about what a horrible mistake the city had made in trying to control something. They should have just felt, let it go and let things just work it out. And so you had some people living at ridiculously cheap rates. And I asked them, well, where are you going to move out to someday? And they said, oh, we will never move out of this place. When our kids are out of college and so on, we can't afford, because our rent would immediately, probably shoot to $500 or something. If I came to Missoula and I was looking for a place to live and I couldn't find something, my next choice, since I kind of know the area here, would be since I have a college education and kind of know how to handle things on my own and not go and ask for a job, I would go on down the pike to Deer Lodge. And instead of looking at Lolo Peak, I'd look at Mount Hagen. Now you say, Deer Lodge? What's in Deer Lodge? Well, if you get a whole bunch of people going to Deer Lodge, it will be like Missoula was when I was in the 2nd grade and first remember Missoula, where Missoula extended to South Avenue, and beyond that it was fields to Lolo. My folks moved up the Rattlesnake 3 blocks north of Lolo Street and were severely criticized for moving that far out of town when they had a little boy. Now, 3 blocks north of Lolo Street is sort of like living in the University District. And so the town was small, and if you send enough people to Deer Lodge, it's going to be just as wonderful as Missoula. And do you know how cheap it would be to live in Deer Lodge? No, don't consider, commuting back to Missoula every day. So,
lose people to attrition, Doug.
Okay. So,
Deer Lodge, got it.
Do you realize that if you move to Jamestown, New York right now, you could buy a nice house that looks like the University District houses for $18,000 to $30,000. Why? Because the major tool industry in that town has moved out. All the tools now are being made in China. So those people have moved out, and there's just dozens and dozens of homes available there. Or, pardon?
No, we're not going to do that, guys.
So,
I'm going to ask you to wrap it up for me.
okay, you can also move to towns north of Pittsburgh, all the way up to Lake Erie, and you can find the same thing. I know someone who moved there. They got a place for $25,000. They got a job at Burger King, and that job enabled them to get a home loan. And so I still am curious, where is it written that we have to provide a home for everyone who comes off the pike at Orange Street?
Fair enough. Ms. Diaz.
My name is Lynette Diaz, and I think some of the, I think affordable housing in Missoula is definitely something that should be addressed, and I'm very happy that the city of Missoula is making this conversation available. The one thing that concerns me is the wages in Missoula. I have a graduate degree, and when I got out of grad school, I started at a very professional job making $24,000 a year. That doesn't even cover the amount of loans that I had to take out to go to grad school. I'm a native Montanan. I want to stay here. I want to continue to live here. And I want to figure out ways that we can increase the wage so that other people can continue to stay here and live here as well. In the last 6 months, I've had 3 of my very dear friends move because they can find better jobs elsewhere. So, thank you.
My name is Dave Armerding. I can wear 2 hats. I own a property management company in Missoula. I'm also the board chairman of the Poverello Center. So housing is a very important thing to me. I'd like to thank Andrea Davis and the Missoula Housing Authority for what they do for our town. Both of my hats appreciate that. And I just want you to know that at the Poverello Center, we are seeking to serve the very lowest income person that enters our town and stays here for any duration. And unfortunately, we're not able to serve them all. One of the folks spoke tonight about accessibility, and the POV is an old building. If any of you have been in it, you know that very little of it is accessible. And we're seeking to make it more accessible. As it stands right now, we can't let a person sleep at the Poverello who needs wheelchair accessibility. And so we'd like to correct that. And we'd also like to be able to serve families with children, homeless families that are looking for a place in Missoula or have gotten evicted from an apartment or somehow lost their housing. But we can't do that either, and we're seeking to do that. And that $25 that was mentioned earlier goes a long way to help the Poverello meet those needs. And I know a lot of people in this room are very generous with this organization, and I just want to express my appreciation for that. The city of Missoula has been extremely thoughtful to our organization as well, and we appreciate that as well. But I just want you to know that we're part of this component. We are the very bottom of this component, and it's the organization, or it's this community that helps our organization actually exist. We do get grants from government agencies and things like that, but what we really depend on are the people here. I moved here about 30 years ago, and I moved from New Jersey, and to me it looked like everything was so dang cheap here. It was ridiculous. And then after a couple of years, my savings ran out, and I needed to actually live off of an income that a Montanan makes. And the reality of living in Montana hit me then. And I remember starting a company, taking care of rental properties, and seeing a lot of homes that were foreclosed on. This would have been in like 1984, 1985. I could have bought a home for $35,000 to about $50,000. And at that time, I couldn't afford it. And, you know, things did look a little desperate to me, but we kept working, and soon an opportunity came along to buy one of the management companies that I worked for. I had to borrow the down payment to do it. There were times a couple years into that, trying to pay it off, that my banker told me I ought to declare bankruptcy and quit. I didn't. But 14 years after I moved here, I got to build the house that I had dreamed about having when I came to this town. But I tell you, I had to work a lot more than 40 hours a week to do it. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's just what it took to do it here. And I now have 4 kids, that 2 of which have recently purchased homes. They couldn't have done it without my help. And so I understand that for a 20-something-year-old couple who's making less than $50,000 a year, it's difficult to buy a home that's even below the median price in this town. And yet I think in the same way that this community helps the Poverello Center, it takes community to help each other purchase homes and keep homes or make homes affordable. I appreciate what you're doing, Mr. Mayor, for addressing this concern. I wish I had great answers other than more than 40-hour work weeks and helping your kids buy houses. But I think those are two practical things. That's what I had to do in my own life to bring that about. But I guess what I did appreciate is that I actually had the opportunity to do those things. And I think our town still affords those opportunities. But it takes a community to keep thinking about each other and doing those things. The accessibility is a greater and greater concern as we have more and more people who need access to properties. And so I appreciate what you said tonight, too.
Ray?
I apologize if this is more of a question than an answer, but I would really like to hear more from the builders about what it would take to make it possible for them to make a decent living and to be able to build affordable housing in Missoula. I think if we're talking about the market driving what the cost of the housing is going to be, what do they need to be able to make it work for them and have a level playing field to make it possible for them to live too?
I'm not a builder, but I want to thank the mayor and the city for doing. My name's Dick King, and I work for the Missoula Economic Development Corporation. Just have a small suggestion, but I want to second the comments that were made. You know, energy costs are related to affordable housing. Alex made a great point about transit, and another person made a point about density. Those are related developments. If we can make the decision to have more units per unit of land, and we can serve it with public transit, we can save money, and that helps with affordable housing. I noticed, John, there's a couple of tools that are mentioned here, possible sources of funds. The cooperative housing project, I was in Hamilton today at a meeting, and I told them I was coming here tonight, and they said, well, make sure you mention cooperative housing. So that's been done. A lot of interest about this development, so hopefully that can be one of the components that we look at. In addition, I'd recommend we take a look at housing rehabilitation. There are a lot of homes in Missoula that are fairly old that are traditionally workforce or affordable housing, and if a young family wants to buy them, they might be able to finagle the mortgage, but they're looking at the cost of repair. And that can be pretty intimidating, and the energy costs related to inefficient home. So if one of these funds, like the urban renewal or the Housing Trust Fund, if we're able to do that, if we could have a component where we could make housing rehabilitation loans, and those would be subordinated to the senior mortgage, and if the house was sold, those would be repaid so that we come back. But if, as long as they stayed in the home, they would service the first mortgage, and the second one would wait until down the road quite a ways. It would allow us to do a couple things. One is to improve the quality of housing, address energy conservation, and also the problem we face, and this is, I have to be realistic, I just look at this top box here on potential revenue. That's about $10 million a year in federal funding for housing, and those funds are very, I think I'm safe in saying that those funds are very difficult to expand because they're income guidelines, very strict income guidelines. A lot of the problem we're talked about are people who don't fit in quite that category. And again, I think if we had a little bit of flexibility with local funds, we could address this issue perhaps, and housing rehabilitation might be one means. Thank you.
Mr. Edge.
My name's David Edgell, and I'm a builder, and I wanted to answer some of your questions. Is this on? Yeah. One of the main things is the cost of land, which we all know about. It's very difficult to get it down. Probably one thing that will get it down is a recession. The double-edged sword. As Kim Chambers mentioned, a quicker subdivision process would make a big difference. It's gone from 6 to 9 months to over 2 years now. If you're holding a piece of property that you're going to develop 50 or 80 lots on, you're going to be paying $1 million to $2 million to buy that property. Then you're going to hold it for 2 years. That's $280,000 in additional costs. Looking towards the city, I would far rather see less regulation, less code requirements. We keep upping the codes. We change the earthquake zones. Missoula isn't really very subject to earthquakes, but we have to do a lot more work on the houses to make it meet those codes. My guess, since I've started building 29 years ago in Missoula, the requirements that codes add, probably 10,000 a house, and that's probably conservative. We used to build houses that didn't have all these tie-downs, and you name it. The regulations are huge. They're largely legally stimulated, but I don't remember seeing a house fall off its foundation, shift off its foundation, lean sideways. Over the last 30 years, houses we built that didn't have those code requirements, they're just fine. It's a huge cost that ever increases. Higher density is something that whenever we propose anything with higher density, we're always slammed. Why are you trying to increase the density in our neighborhood? It's necessary. It's very necessary if we're going to get the price down. And another thing that maybe is hard to accept is that we could all have simpler tastes. It's like if you buy a car today, you can't go to the car lot and find a car that doesn't have everything on it. We don't need that. We build affordable houses, and people have a budget for their appliances, and they go and spend $3,000 more because they want a microwave to talk to them or something like that. So I think our taste has a lot to do with what is put on the market, too. Thank you.
I have a refrigerator that talks to me. Voice may be in my head.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for this occasion. I'm Jamie Hoffman. I'm an architect. I've been one here in Missoula for 30 years and lived here for 36 or 7. I'm also the chairman of the Housing Authority Board. I also served on a committee that oversaw the production of this report, which is now a year old, which is called Barriers to Affordable Housing. In it, there's lots of interesting stuff. I'm just going to pick up on one factoid here. Insufficient land zoned properly for residential development. Over the course of the next 5 years, we are going to see the need to produce 1,071 rental units, but there is only now presently zoned residential property at higher densities for that for 591. If we built out all of that zone property for multifamily in its entirety, we would have to, in addition, every year upzone another 100 units worth of land. At zone, you need 30 units an acre at least to develop apartments. So every year you'd have to do that. We're a year into that already. Think about how much has been produced and upzoned here in the last year. I don't think very much at all. You are about to observe an enormous distortion in the housing market. We are not going to be able to build those apartments, much less affordable entry-level housing for purchase, without upzoning property at densities that allow the production of higher density housing. That distortion is going to happen because demand will outstrip supply, and it will force prices up. At the same time that we have the responsibility to think about where we're going to place it, and we need to start now, because in 2.5, actually it's a year and a half, if all that land was developed, we're out of land for meeting demand. Right now, the Housing Authority reports that there's a 1.5% unoccupancy rate in our rental housing stock. That's half of Missoula. So what do we need to do to produce affordable housing in the rental market? We need to find property to zone at 30 units an acre and more, and we need a lot of it. Where's that going to go?
Who am I missing? You're hanging tough. Anybody who hasn't had a chance to talk once, how's that? Jim. And then, yes, certainly.
My name's Jim Sayer, and I lived in the Bay Area for quite a while. I was born in San Francisco, and I guess next to Manhattan, it is kind of the mother of all unaffordable places to live. And I worked very hard with a number of land conservation groups that eventually created partnerships with a number of business associations, because what we realized is that we weren't able to do exactly what you were saying, Jamie. We found that in about 80 or 90% of the situations where more dense development, and this was in the Bay Area, not in Montana, was being proposed, was getting shot down because of neighborhood concerns. So what we finally realized is that we had to create a coalition of labor organizations, builders, architects, business associations, environmentalists who were concerned about sprawl, and they all got together and then created the partnership to do an endorsement program for projects, and basically took a lot of the recommendations for upzonings for specific projects and then converted those into actual projects being approved to the point where we were getting 80 to 90% approval ratings for, or approvals for these projects. And it still didn't solve the problem entirely. I mean, I think the other thing we have to realize is it's going to be a constantly moving target. If you live in an attractive place, people are always going to want to come here. And while there's no rule that says we have to provide a house, a compassionate community is not going to be one that's going to want to turn people away or have hundreds of homeless people sleeping in the streets either. So it's always a balancing act. But I have seen over the years a lot of creative solutions coming to the fore in terms of creating choices, in terms of how you use your land, how you design, the design standards that you mentioned. There's so much more out there now, and some of it even harks back to the simplicity of when I stayed with a friend a couple of weeks ago in Philadelphia. He was living in what's called a Trinity. A Trinity is a 3-story, 700-square-foot house that it was wonderful for 2 people. It's totally walkable. It has no parking requirement. It has no parking because they had no parking requirements in the 1700s when it was built. But, you know, it's very simple, fun. The guy loves it, and it's right in the heart of Philadelphia. I think there's so many opportunities to utilize land better and use a lot of the designs that are coming forward to provide more housing opportunities that will be totally in character with a garden city. So thank you for hosting this.
You knew better. My name is Steve Minogue. I own a business here in town. I am in the construction business. I'm not a builder, but I'm one of the trade guys that do the work for the builders. I have 10 employees. I have 2 that have been with me, one for 3 years and one for 4. Both of these gentlemen work far more than 40 hours a week. I know that they make far more than the average wage in Missoula, Montana, and neither of them can afford a house. My question Your Honor, is are we talking about two different issues here? This is what it seems like. It seems to me like we're talking about subsidized housing, and then we're talking about affordable housing for firemen and people that want to. Can both of these issues be solved with the same options, or are we really talking about two different subjects here?
I'm going to generally resist answering questions, but I think we are talking about two different subjects, and really the focus of what we're talking about here is the folks that we're not capturing elsewhere in our programs. That doesn't mean we're taking care of all those people, and I recognize that we're not even coming close, but we do have some programming in place. We don't have much programming in place today for those folks who are between 80 and 125% of the median income, the guys who work for you, the men and women who work with me at the city, et cetera. So yeah, I think there are two different issues, and our focus, really my focus, is try to put together a program for those folks while recognizing that I don't work in an either-or space. So, right. So I get to pay attention to folks below 80% and even folks who are far above 125%. But I think that is a distinction that I'd like to make here tonight. That's kind of the focus of the program that we've been talking about and working on. Andrea.
Thank you, Mary Engen. My name is Andrea Davis. I work for the Missoula Housing Authority. I'm a native to Montana as well. And something that I'd like to emphasize, Jim, you mentioned, is partnerships. And a number of people in the audience here have mentioned partnerships, and we've partnered with a number of folks and agencies in here. And without partnering together, we cannot accomplish these great feats alone. Something, I'm just going to throw this out there, and there's always a, well, we can't do that because, and we run into that a lot, and we administer federal programs. I could rattle off regulations that don't allow us to do things, but there are a lot of things in this room. Locally, we have initiatives and talent that we need to rely upon. And going back to the partnering notion, for example, the economic development piece. I mean, without true economic development, and that's a big issue. I understand it's generational versus affordable housing can be accomplished within a year or two, depending on what you're doing, what type of program, if it's a tax incentive. And economic development's a huge piece. But without real economic development and real jobs, we're going to continually go through this cycle. And so maybe it's a partnering piece where we have a job training element with local high schools or labor unions. And if we do that, local builders, if they do that, for example, then they have some fee waivers. But we know that fee waivers can't happen without a pool of money available. So maybe that pool of money is available through some sort of a bond issue or gas tax or all the different ways that tools in our toolbox, we know that those are available. The reality is federal government and federal funds are decreasing on a daily basis. And we have a lot of local talent and a lot of local initiative here. And through our partnering, that's how we're going to make Missoula the place that we want to stay and live. So that's just one idea of a possibility of really kind of branching out more holistically, because before we can really address this, it is a holistic issue, both with our health. We want to save our gardens. Well, we want to have good jobs, and we want to have an affordable place to live. So partnering, I see, is a critical element in that. Thank you for holding this tonight.
That segues very nicely into what I wanted to say. Thanks, Andrea. It really pays off. One thing we do know about trying to develop here in Missoula, and I think this would apply to homeownership units as well as rental housing, is that our land costs and our construction costs are as high here as they are on the West Coast, but our wages are considerably lower, and the amount of rent that we can charge is 25% lower than you can get in an area like Portland or Seattle. That makes a lot of the tools that are available in other communities to build affordable housing not available here, because you can't borrow enough money, you can't charge enough rents to service enough debt to build the units that you need to build. So we are going to need to be creative. We're going to need to do a whole combination of all of the things that we've talked about tonight. And we've really seen a lot of really you heard a lot of really good ideas tonight. So I think this is just a great conversation to have. So thank you again.
Heather McMillan with Homeward. I'd like to echo what Andrea and a lot of people in the room have said about partnerships. I know we almost brought up the subject of talking about the difference between affordable rental housing and affordable home ownership. And I guess I want to go back. The original intent of this meeting was to discuss all these potential tools and all these ideas. And I want to say from affordable rental housing development perspective that a lot of these tools will help us. Not one tool is going to fix that problem. These tools working together will help us, but also help our for-profit partners in the city help deal with this issue of affordable housing, because we can't do it alone. The Housing Authority can't do it alone, and neither can the for-profit developers and the home builders. So as long as we're looking at this from a strategic standpoint of the shotgun effect as far as tools and all these ideas we put around the table, I think if we have this community conversation, we come up with these tools that can help all of us, make development easier. It's never an easy subject, but all of these things combined can help us start to approach this subject matter and not just say affordable rental or affordable home ownership. It's also economic development. It's also looking at the community as a whole. And I wanted to say thank you for putting this together and the opportunity to have the conversation and be positive when we talk about it and say we're all in this together and not one of us can solve the problem, but as a community, I think we can.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Michael O'Neill with AWARE and the Montana Home Choice Coalition. I would just say that I think it's important that we don't see these as two different issues. They really are the same issue, that the need for decent, quality, affordable housing for whatever your income level is. And I think that needs to be recognized. And what it requires is multiple different strategies depending on where you fall in that continuum. And beyond, we need to break out of the boxes that regulation may federal regulation may fall upon us. But there's some important perception versus reality that needs to be established here in terms of there's often a sense, and when you talk to people, they're like, well, the low-income people, they have their housing needs taken care of, that, they must get it from a program, and we don't, let's take care of people who aren't getting the subsidy. The reality is that the waiting list for housing, for Section 8 and for public housing throughout in this community and across the state is quite long, and many people give up waiting. The reality is, since 1981, federal support for low-income housing has been a steady decline in real dollars. The reality is the subsidy for high-income people has steadily grown over those same years. Most people are unaware that the state of Montana does not provide a single dollar of general fund support for affordable housing. On the other hand, they provide over $100 million a biennium of tax subsidy for primarily 80% of that 100+ million goes to the highest 10% of the income population. And so I think as a group, we need to organize on a federal level, on a state level, and certainly this meeting tonight is very reflective of a community coming to focus on it. But we do need to change federal housing policy, put a reprioritization of addressing every income level in those subsidies. We need to do work in the state legislature to form a Montana Housing Fund. That's been an effort for many years that has gone unfunded. There's a lot of strategies. The cooperative housing is an excellent idea. We need to create enabling legislation. There's barriers in the law in terms of creating cooperative housing that can be changed. But I think it's important to recognize that the programs that generally are thought to be meeting the needs of low-income people are so dreadfully underfunded that people are falling. The reason people are on the streets is not, it's primarily the lack of resource, not themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't mean to at all give the impression that we think everyone else is taken care of, because I simply know that to not be the case. So it is a little after 9 o'clock. You've hung with me for a couple of hours here, and I really appreciate that. Anyone I'm missing who'd like to say anything? Or otherwise, I think we'll Yes, ma'am.
I don't have any answers either, but I just wanted to put another face on affordable housing because I was one of those people who benefited from the Housing Authority, the Section 8 program, when I grew up here and was one of those young people who had to leave to make money, and I went away for college, spent $100,000 on my education, and thought I'd come back to Montana and make some money and raise my family, and found out with my $100,000 college degree, I was going to make $6.85 an hour in Montana. Yeah. American studies, no practical applications. Who knew? I think there definitely should be more education of young people that college is not a answer to everything. But so I found that if I did go down to California, I could make a secretary wage of $25,000 a year versus $7,000 a year, which my job in Montana was making. But I wanted to stay here with my family. I didn't want to leave, and so we do have to work a couple jobs. My husband works in the construction industry during the week and does different labor jobs on the weekends, and my industry, I'm in sales, so I can just work as many hours as I want to, which is hard because we do have 4 kids, and being a first-time home buyer, we just bought our first home this summer, and with a lot of finagling, a lot of help from the different programs that are available. But still being in that position of, spend time with our 4 kids or, work some more so that we can pay the mortgage. And it is really, really scary to be a young person and a home buyer in this area and to be faced with those choices of, should I go someplace else where it's just easier? My sister went to Hawaii for a few years and started out there at $45,000, and her house on the beach that she rented, fully furnished, cost her the same as my house in Montana. renting. I couldn't believe it. I was thinking, wow. So I do think it's a huge combination of those two things, of working to make it affordable, but also the economics. If we can't have better jobs for young people, we're going to continue to lose young people to other places because most people don't want to have that kind of time and energy of just trying to make ends meet.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I have a success story I just want to share with you quickly. And I was motivated by the man who lived in New York City, because I lived in New York City for 2 months one time. And same situation, it was $500 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment, and it was more expensive because it had a little tiny balcony out on the edge. But I did fine because the wages were higher. And then I lived in Los Angeles, and I actually bought a condo there. This was about 15 years ago, and my payment was about $1,000 a month. It was a 1-bedroom, and I really couldn't afford it, so I rented the bedroom out, and I slept on the couch. And I did it. And I had a clothes hanger thing in the living room for my clothes, and I am a single person, and I have a single income. I decided to move back to Montana and knew I didn't want to rent forever. And so I bought a single-wide old mobile home, lived in it. I paid $10,000 for it. And I paid it off. And when I paid it off, I rented it out. And I moved into Canyon Creek Village, bought a house. And I kept it for 2 years. Of course, the price of homes was going up. So 2 years later, I sold it. I made $50,000, bought a new home, my dream home. But it's actually one I can rent the basement apartment out in. Without that, I couldn't live there and make the payments. And what I'm saying is you have to be creative. Next Tuesday, I'll be 56 years old. Thank you. But it took me that long by myself to get my dream home. And I think sometimes we're impatient. I'm sorry, I'm shaking. I think we're impatient. These, kids, they're 25 years old right out of college, and they want their dream home. It just doesn't work that way. And you do have to kind of pay the dues if you want to live in a place that's popular like Missoula Los Angeles was just as hard. New York City was just as hard. You have to be creative. I learned about real estate. I learned about mortgage loans. I did my research, and I did it. So I just want to, maybe this is a good way to end it, with a little bit of a success story, and it's possible. I don't promote single wide old mobile homes all the way down the road for affordable housing, because that's kind of an eyesore, and I don't think that's what we want to see in the Garden City. But I do think we need some kind of homes, maybe smaller, to improve the chances of someone buying us a home earlier. I think we expect too much sometimes. You see Asian families come into America, 3 families living together in one house, so they can make a payment and buy a house. When that house is paid for, they buy another one together. And eventually they all have a home to live in. Anyway, that's my say.
I think we're going to wrap it up, ladies and gentlemen. With that, we had some creativity. We've had a lot of thoughtful conversation. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. I appreciate your spending your valuable time with us this evening. We're going to continue this conversation because I think it's important enough that we continue at the City of Missoula to work on it with all of you to find some solutions. And we're not going to find them immediately, but we are going to do our best to be creative and take into account the thoughtful energy that you all are bringing to the table this evening. So again, I really appreciate your time and efforts here. And Mr. Ashby, you want to wrap it up?
If I may, I'd just like to comment. I'd like to let everyone in this room know that one of the goals that I had in joining or being invited to and then joining the the mayor's housing team was that we wouldn't just be a group of individuals that sat around and talked and it was just one more set of meetings or group of meetings. My goal, and I think the goal of others in the meeting, was to turn a lot of the dialogue into action. So I guess what I'm saying is I'd like to provide some level of assurance that we are going forward with certain ideas, or at least we're discussing a lot of ideas, and it's not going to be solved by any one factor. It's not going to be solved by me building 100 houses a year or by Homeward doing their quantity of homes per year or another entity or another builder. It's going to be multifactorial, and it's going to get creative. It's going to be high density. It's going to be co-op housing. It's going to be market rate housing. It's going to be apartments. And so the goal to come out of this eventually is that we will have a lot of tools in the toolbox, and there is no one solution to any of this. It's multifactorial. And maybe at a follow-up meeting we could provide a lot of the information that we have come up with as a result of that.
Sounds good. And we are going to continue to chip away at solutions and develop a program that makes a difference. A couple of things, ladies and gentlemen. If you'd like, I'm going to stick around here, so if you want to talk to me, I'll be right here near the front of the room. If you'd like more information, we have those email sign-up sheets that are available. You can also give us a call at the Office of Planning and Grants. We'll get you on our email list. You're welcome to give me a shout at any time. If you have anything else that's on your mind, you're welcome to give me a holler. Stop and talk with me some more this evening. I'd be happy to do that. And in the meantime, thank you very much for your efforts and your time this evening. Really appreciate it.